When you are making a film that takes place all within one location, it is tough. How do you make it look interesting for however long the movie is? I hopefully have succeeded at this with my film FM 132.9, which takes place inside a radio station the entire film. That's the only location. Hideaki Anno and the cinematographer Kazuki Yamada ran into this problem with Shin Godzilla, and I think they succeeded in some places better than others. I think there's too many wide-angle lenses, but that's a directorial style. Alien, made in 1979, directed by Ridley Scott, is a great sci-fi example of this, with claustrophobia, dark shadows, and suspense taking place entirely on a space station. A war film called Conspiracy is about the 1C conference. It takes place entirely in one room, but it never feels tired or old. But before all of those, there was The Green Slime, a fun, dumb, stupid action film full of everything I want in a tokusatsu flick. Men in suits, colorful costumes and sets, outlandish miniatures, stern and slightly over-the-top acting, and amazing and fun music. Kenji Fukusaku, even in his lesser flicks like this in Message from Spaceman in 1978, that's a fun romp, always has great cinematography. Even Tora 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 has his style in it, his standard use of the anamorphic lens, and filling it up completely. He never has a frame in his films where nothing is happening. There is always movement, be it people, the camera, or in The Green Slime, lights and spacecraft. Giant props to DP Yoshikazu Yamasawa for capturing this vision so well. In The Green Slime, there is never a dull moment in terms of cinematography. Shot reverse shots are always driven, and the frame, it's framed in a way that immediately directs your eye. They usually consist of having someone really close in the foreground, blacking about half of the anamorphic screen, and then having your subject in focus in the background. I've always loved these kind of shots, specifically with anamorphic lenses. You create a frame within a frame this way, and The Green Slime is chock full of these shots from beginning to end. The camera feels like a character, which is something I've always said ever since I can remember, ever since I got interested in the genre. It moves when it needs to. It remains still when it needs to. It basically plays God. It lets us know what we need to know, but also hides other things when it doesn't want us to know something. An example of this is when the creatures first strike, with the over-the-top scream of the assistant and the electrician being wrapped up with the green tentacles. It's silly and campy, but it clearly had an impact on people like Dan O'Bannon, and others while writing films such as Alien, made in 1979, and even some of the action from James Cameron's sequel, Aliens. Kenji Fukusaku used a lot of quick zooms, either pushing in or pushing out, or pulling out. It is something quite common in his early work in the 1960s through the end of the 1970s, basically ending in Virus, made in 1980, and that's a fun failure of a movie. Destroy All Monsters, directed by Shiro Honda, does something similar. Seriously, put the two films side by side and their cinematography is pretty close to the same, though Destroy All Monsters is slightly more dynamic in scale. This style had gone away in favor of more direct camera movement, and it makes sense the more you look at it. Technology now allows us to have more dynamic range with steady cams, Ronins, shoulder rigs, Jimmy Jibs, and a lot of other ways. The cameras are also much smaller, not usually using film anymore. We use digital. And the film's reels are usually what took up the most of the space, and why film cameras were usually so heavy. But I've always liked zooms, be them dynamic or simple. My favorite case of this in The Green Slime is when the characters Vince and Rankin finally square off. The camera only zooms in just ever so slightly on Rankin, but it's enough to signify that his focus has changed from the monitor car trapped under the airlock panel to Vince, as he threatens to open it back again and risk the whole station. It's little things like this that stand out and draw you in more. One shot during the middle scene where they try to explain what the creatures are, and it actually has one of my favorite zooms ever. The camera booms out as Rankin calls Vince and his men back to safety, and the creatures are hoarding into the hallway. The shot reveals everything all crammed together into this hallway, close together, and they're all moving. No one is standing still. When Vince gets back to Rankin, the camera then zooms right back in on the creatures as more storm straight into the soldiers. Frantic composition by fantastic composition by Fukusatsu and the cinematographer. I also have to give major props to the lighting department. The lighting in that sequence is actually really good. The camera also moves plenty. Its sets are never tiring as a result, which they easily could have been. A camera will push in on Martin, played by Robert Dunham, and then he says, "First squad, come with me." And then it will track with the squad and pan down as they move down a stairwell as red alarm lights shine in the background and spin back and forth. This shot is the epitome of what I like in cinematography. The costumes are blue, contrasted with the clinical silver of the walls. You have red lights flashing and spinning, already adding movement to a shot. You then have the actors moving, adding more motion to the sequence. And then there is the camera. It is a small push-in, then rounds out to a tracking. It is simple, but add these together, and it's one hell of a dynamic shot, even though it only lasts for about 10 seconds. And I just want to say this, the entire film is composed like that. Another simpler example is when Dr. Halperson explains how the creatures spread and grow. Rankin has his back to the camera, Halperson is in the middle of the frame and in focus, and Vince is behind Halperson looking at all the readouts. However, Vince connects the dots, and though out of focus, we see this in his facial expression. He says, "Jack." And the camera then moves so that Rankin is now on the right side of the frame instead of on the left. Still out of focus in the foreground. The camera racks to Vince, and he says, "The power room. If Halperson's right, those things are going to be all over the place." It's such a simple camera move. Lasts 2 seconds at the most. But it added so much movement with the rack, adding such an intensity and direct control over everything in each shot. The camera never feels out of control, except for when things really are out of control. The movements are sharp and crisp. It knows exactly where to begin, who to focus on, and where the shot will end. Let's look at shots where the camera never moves. We've been talking about movement a lot. Let's talk about the opposite of that. It is quite easy to make these shots stale, bland, and boring. But it is the set design, the bright costumes which easily stand out, and their composition within the shot itself that keeps you glued to the screen. There is never a shot that isn't full, giving you a feeling of not a closed station, but a crowded one. There's a big difference there. Something far different than in Alien, where it does feel close and feels very claustrophobic, or other space operas of the time both during and after this film was made. Lisa, yes, I named Lisa from my film Which Way They Walk after her, and same with Vince Elliott, runs up to the control panel and asks if Vince is outside yet towards the end of the film. She runs into frame, the camera is Dutch, a man is in the foreground out of focus, driving your eye to her. Behind her are other soldiers and pilots, all lined up and cascading into the distance. This adds a great deal of depth to these shots, which is hard to achieve in anamorphic, but they did it extremely well in this film. Speaking of Dutch angles, when C-Block explodes, the station is wielded off kilter. I won't go into the scientific inaccuracies of that, but whatever. This is a fun, campy film. For those of you who don't know what Dutch angles are camera positions where the camera is off kilter. It's slanted to one side. From this point forward in the green slime, the shot on Gamma 3 is in Dutch. It's consistently there. Every shot from that point forward is at some sort of Dutch angle. It is what's really happening on screen. But there's also more to do subconsciously with having the camera Dutch. And Fukusatsu did this frequently, even in his last films, like Battle Royale. This is the end. Rankin is going to destroy the station. He and Vince have had a huge fight. Lisa has sided with Vince, but she loves Rankin in reality. There's a whole bunch of melodrama here that is beautifully over the top and cheesy in all the right ways. But it's tense. Everything is off kilter. Their relationship with each other, these three people, as ridiculous as it is off kilter. Our triumvirate has fallen apart, which is why it works so well with the Dutch angles. That's what Dutch angles are supposed to do. They're supposed to make the audience feel unbalanced, and that is exactly what the camera does here. Now, to make it clear, this is not like Battlefield Earth, where every single shot is Dutched. No, this is the right balance. It's very well done. This being my first video discussing the green slime, I thought I'd tackle my favorite part of the film, which is indeed its cinematography. Its set design can also be ranked into cinematography, even though I know that those are two completely different departments. The movie itself is just so silly, so cheesy, and so beautifully ridiculous I can't help but love it. And I mean that. I adore this film because of how silly and ridiculous and ludicrous and cheesy it is. This movie does what movies should do, and that is escape. I pop it in whenever I go somewhere big or something large has happened in my life, like moving to Long Island, for example. It just makes me feel better. It has that effect on you, being able to brighten your day. But the cinematography is the one area here where this movie genuinely shines above your typical 60s tokusatsu romps. And I think this movie needs more credit than it is given, at least in this particular realm. Seriously, you really won't regret watching this movie. It's just a load of fun. And if I'm going to talk about this movie in the future, I'll have to do an audio commentary. I just love this movie that much. So go on Facebook, like AN Productions for all up-to-date information on what we're doing there. For everything we're doing, follow us on Tumblr, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And join Geeks for Geeks if you just want to feel weird. And in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.
Will you believe it when you're dead?